O'Reilly. Are your wiper blades chattering, skipping, or squeaking? Don't let streaks or smearing on your windshield compromise your visibility. When it's time to replace your wiper blades, stop by O'Reilly Auto Parts and see our selection. Our professional parts people will even install your new wiper blades while you wait. Stop by O'Reilly Auto Parts today. O'Reilly Auto Parts.
There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store, or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today. Hey everybody, listen up. I got mega huge news. Meat Eater Live is heading back out on the road. That's right, join me and the crew. Clay Newcomb, Cal, Yanni, Spencer's going to be there. Phil the Engineer's going to be there. Meat Eater Live, headed back out. Now, when you get every ticket, okay? Every ticket you buy, you get a signed copy of our new Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook. This tour is celebrating the release of the book. Buy a ticket, get a signed copy, Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook, wild game recipes for the grill, smoker, camp stove, and campfire, which I'll point out is a $38 value. Here's where we're going to go. April 23rd, the Mesa Arts Center in Mesa, Arizona. April 24, the Balboa Theater in San Diego. April 25, the Grove in Anaheim, California. April 27, the Crest Theater in Sacramento. April 29, the Union in Salt Lake City. April 30, the Egyptian in Boise. May 1, the Wilma Theater in Missoula. May 2, the Bing Crosby Theater in Spokane, Washington. May 4, Revolution Hall in Portland, Oregon. And May 5, the last day of the tour, Pantages Theater in Tacoma, Washington. For tickets and more information, visit the events page at themeateater.com. Hope to see you at the show.
The Hunting Collective is presented by Element.
I guess I grew up on an older road.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 149. We're almost all the way through October already. That's very sad and poignant for me. How about you, Philip?
How about me what?
How you feeling, buddy?
I was
check in with you. Take your temperature.
I'm doing great. Yeah, it's almost Halloween, spooky times.
What's the costume plan over there?
I don't have one yet. My kid is Iron Man.
Yeah, that's good times.
He's pretty excited about that. Last year, of course, I was Doc Clawley, the White Claw Cowboy.
Yeah, that was back normal times when we could see each other.
I still have my costume. Maybe I'll break it out again because I'm feeling lazy, but I should get more creative.
Yeah, I mean, you could just do any other Doc Holliday kind of costume. Just remove the White Claw in kind of the. What do you have, like cut off jean shorts? It was a pretty sassy number.
Some short ripped jean shorts. I've got I still have my cowboy hat with the drink holders and the straws, so I could maybe I'll swap out White Claw for whiskey and just get a little just prepare for election night.
I'm gonna be. I'm going to be a stormtrooper, as is my wife, and my son is going to be our boss, Kylo Ren.
Oh, I love it.
You're going to be very excited for those images, Phil. I'm only doing it because I love my son. I'm not going to protest. So, but I already did dress up like a stormtrooper for his birthday, and I was feeling it. Feeling the dark side, if you will.
Sure.
So, we got a big episode today. We told you last week that we're going to talk about wound loss and bow hunting and all the things surrounding that, the data, the emotion, the feeling hunters get when you wound an animal with archery tackle and it is never found, or it's found and you lose the meat. on and on. So that's what we're going to talk about today with the great Giannis Patelis, the Latvian Eagle, who we find out gave himself his own nickname, and then Sam Lundgren, our good buddy, who had a tough experience this year. So we'll get on to that. But before we get to that, the emails continue to pile in after the Paul Bashir episode and then last week with Brian Lynn. Thank you guys so much once again. I think this is the high point for the old THC inbox. So please keep those emails coming to thc@themeateater.com. No matter what the subject, I want to read them. And I promise I try to read as many as I absolutely can. And if you're not busy, go over to drinklmnt.com/meateater. Check out our wonderful title sponsor, Drink Element, and their wonderful sugar-free electrolyte beverage that we are now going to, next time we get together, Phil, whenever that is, we have to create a new cocktail called the Bitter Vegan. So I'll leave it up to you to get creative on that one.
Okay.
All right.
It's going to be a tiki drink.
That's good. Phil and his tiki drinks. Well, speaking of some of your fans, Phil, some of your greatest fans, we got an email from a fellow named Ben Upton. You want to hear this email?
Yeah.
He says, "My name's Ben Upton. Even you can't mess that name up, Ben," which is right. I think I nailed it. He said, "I'm writing in to provide Phil with some encouragement to finish his hunter safety course and get excited about hunting. While I know Phil has received plenty of messages, both gentle and otherwise, from all sorts of people, I am here to nudge Phil on as a fellow video game lover." This is perk you up there, Phil? You feeling this?
I am. Continue.
Yeah, I know. Well, I'm an avid hunter, and hunting represents most of my identity. I also really love video games. Phil, I know a lot of folks in the hunting community, especially one Steven Ranella, frown on the idea of video games, but I'm here to tell you that you don't have to sacrifice one for the other. While I prioritize hunting, thinking about hunting, and preparing for hunting over just about anything else, when I do have downtime, I still love to play video games. Don't let the bullies over at Meat Eater convince you that video games are detrimental to an outdoor lifestyle. They all have downtime hobbies. Ben's, for example, seems to be drinking. It's fine. Yeah, that really is. Phil, once you experience how rewarding it can be to dedicate yourself to preparing for a hunt, waking up early, putting in the miles, and working hard to put good quality meat on the table for the family, you'll understand why we're all pushing you so hard to complete your hunter's ed. That being said, sometimes there is no sound in the world better than the so sweet staccato beep of your PlayStation after a long day's hunt. The blood, sweat, and tears that you put into that day and that week pursuing wild game will make those video games all the more enjoyable. That's coming from our buddy Ben Upton. He said, "So cheers to you, Phil. Crack a White Claw. Finish your damn hunter education and keep providing us with the content we all love so much." Thanks, Ben. Commentary, Phil.
I mean, that was a very compelling argument. I just want to say first off the bat, it's going to happen. By next week, it will be done. I also want to say that if there are any Destiny 2 players on PlayStation 4 who want to, do some stuff with me before the next DLC comes out next month, hit me up on Instagram. I'd love to run some dungeons, some raids. Get a hold of me.
Don't know what you're talking about. I have no idea what you just said, but it sounded inviting. I will not be there.
Oh, too bad.
All right, we got a whole lot of other real serious stuff to get to. A bunch of your emails, and we're going to get one from Blake McGee. Blake McGee, of course, I'm sure has written in before. He says, "Your podcast really has me examining my own ethics and morals around hunting. I agree with you about not, quote-unquote, farming out the responsibility of killing to someone else. And like you said, this journey of ironing out the nuances of our experience is and should be a lifelong one. This past weekend while sitting in the stand, I had a thought. If my joy of hunting is derived from the experience and the pursuit, not just the killing of an animal, could I be happy with a hunting season if I didn't kill one? I know you've had a struggle this season with your Montana elk. I'll be very interested in hearing your take. What you anticipate your emotions would be if you were completely unsuccessful for a hunting season." That's coming from Blake. Well, Blake, I will say that I've never had a totally and completely unsuccessful hunting season, talking about an entire year or even entire fall or entire spring. I've always kind of been able to fill a tag or two along the way somewhere. But I will tell you, flat out, straight up, Montana has been kicking my ass. It seems that every other state I go to, I fill a tag, but Montana is stingy, man. It has been stingy for me for reasons I can't explain, but it's a shot right to the ego to not be able to be successful in any long stretch of time, as I would couch my time in Montana thus far. But this is a hard thing to think about. It's a hard thing to talk about. So those of you that are in the middle of October here and maybe haven't filled a tag, whether you're new or a veteran hunter, whether it's because you haven't had time to go outside and spend because of whatever reason, or you spent a lot of time and you just haven't found the success that you were hoping for, I don't know that I have any one shred of advice to get you thinking in the right way. But to answer Blake's question, could I be happy with the hunting season if I didn't kill an animal? Not fully. Not fully. I think it's a little bit trite. It's to say, I'm out there for the experience. I mean, I'm out there for the experience up until the point where I want to provide for my family and I want to have success in the thing I've been thinking about and training for and preparing for my entire life, kind of strung along here throughout the years. So, it's really easy to say it's all about the journey and the experience. People that usually say that are the ones that aren't killing stuff, are the ones that aren't having the success that they want. So in the moment when you're pursuing animals and it's not working out, one thing I do is just take a step back and look around and enjoy the scenery and enjoy the fact that I'm out there doing what I love and I have something I love so much, like hunting. But beyond that, you should be bummed if you don't kill something. You should be seriously bummed and probably a little bit hungry along the way, because no matter what, it's so much better having elk or deer or pheasant or turkey on the table than it is beef or chicken or pork or whatever. So that's my thing, and thank you, Blake, for writing in. We're going to move on to John Stelflew. I mean, come on, John. Stelllflue. How would you spell that? Stelflew?
Stelflew.
Yeah, Stelflew. That's probably pretty easier than I made it sound. All right, John. He said, I enjoyed your conversation with Brian Lynn. That was last week. If you haven't listened to it, stop now. Go back and listen to episode 148 with Brian Lynn from the Sportsman's Alliance. We'll take a break, and we're back. He said, one part that was thought-provoking to me was when you said, don't find yourself at the extreme. Don't go yelling at vegans on the street. I agree 100% with this, but what is extreme? Extreme to you and I may be different than extreme to a vegan, an anti-hunter, or even a non-hunter. I know I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but as the fall hunting continues to happen, my social media feeds are full of what many people think are just a picture of a deer or a pheasant or some ducks. In our mind, not extreme at all, but to a non-hunter or an anti-hunter, those same pictures could be viewed as extreme, when those pictures are captioned or hashtagged in a certain way, of course. I saw one recently that bothered me. It was an IG photo of a bunch of dead Canadian geese. He says Canadian geese. Remember, they're Canada geese. They're not Canadian. They're Canada's. Remember that. Stacked on a tailgate, and it was hashtagged Piles Make Smiles. Well, not everyone is going to smile at this. Some will consider this extreme. I know you've talked about this before regarding grip and grins, and I think this is something that we all need to be talking about more. One thing I have tried to incorporate in my grip and grins is a story. Now, I understand not everyone enjoys whipping up a story like I do, but having some context around a photo can allow the viewer to perceive that photo in an entirely different manner. And he sent some posts where he's illustrating what he tries to do. The overall question, I mean, we've covered grip and grins a whole lot on this show, right, Phil? I mean, you're read in on what that is.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
To the point where some people are like, just stop talking about it. We get it. But to address what John is saying here, I get it, man. It's hard to level set everyone's perspective on something that you do on social media or otherwise. It's hard to think of what everyone might think about something that you've posted or some picture or some ways. But to his example of Piles Make Smiles, that's obviously not taking into consideration some folks that never shot a pile of Canada geese before. You bastard, John. You got me saying Canadian. Well, we do love Canada. And by the way, a lot of people were upset at a lot of Canadians wrote in last week were upset at Brian Lynn for saying that hockey's like soccer on ice. And so I just want to say in this time of cancel culture, I disavow that statement. And I do not want anybody to think that I agree that hockey is soccer on ice. Hockey is a lovely sport played by mostly Canadians, and we love the country of Canada.
Yeah, that statement was both offensive to Canadians and all Europeans. So good job, Brian Lynn. There,
good job,
you
Brian
managed
Lynn.
To piss everyone off.
Yeah, we disavow you. We don't want to get canceled. We're a little bit scared of that, so we like to keep going with our show. So, but anyway, I don't even know what I was saying. Everybody knows when somebody is going to be a little more brass or crass about something like hunting and sharing dead animals. Some people just say, I'm going to do what I do and I'm going to celebrate the way I celebrate. And I'm not really going to think about what everyone in the world might think of what I'm up to. And I've said in the past, the way that I approach it has changed over the years. When I first got into podcasting, when I first got into thinking that I might have something to say on a public forum, I really did want to tell people to think hard about this grip and grin and how non-hunters viewed us, because I was in a spot in my life where I was surrounded by a bunch of non-hunters at my workplace and in my life, and they were all asking me, why do you guys do that? And I wanted to get across to people that is often what those folks think when they see these grip and grins or whatever images that we throw out there. So I still do believe that. I do believe that you have an opportunity to go out there and share something that's going to shine a positive light on everybody. You have that opportunity, and you do in almost everything in your life. But at the same time, I'm not going to be the one to tell you what to do. I'm just not. I hope that if you listen to this podcast, you're kind of gathering some insights and perspectives on important topics and ways that are productive to move throughout the social media and the rest of your life. I know I have learned and gotten better over time and learned what do I want to share, what do I not want to share, because I think hard about everything I put on social media, and I don't really want to live my life there. I want to curate the things I post there in a certain way, so that because I know there's a lot of people that follow me there that don't know me, that don't know who I am, that don't know why I say what I say. They're not my inner circle. I've never met them, and I probably never will meet them. And so I try to understand my audience. So in terms of what John's saying, man, just understand your audience and post what you think is appropriate. And most people know when they're poking the bear and know when they're trolling and know when they're throwing this thing that we do back in everyone's face purposefully. And that's something just turns me off. And if I see it, I walk away from it. I don't need it around me. And I don't imagine anybody does. So you feel like that sums her up there, Philip?
Yeah, good job.
Thanks, bud. I need to crack a White Claw after some of these emails. But before we get to anything, before we get to our great friend Giannis, the Latvian Eagle Patelis, and Sam Lundgren to talk about wounding loss, we got a little not so sharp moment for you. Play the jingle, Phil.
No. Just kidding.
Work sharp, not so sharp moments, sharp so you don't have to be. Season 2! Yeah!
Before we get going here on this particular not so sharp moment, we have to continue to address this, folks. I have counted, and I'm trying to find a non-poop related not so sharp moment to read. I'm trying to give you people free field sharpeners from our friends at Work Sharp, and you just can't get off the poop stories. And I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's something that Phil and I have done to deserve this. Where are we at, Phil? What do we do? I think I might just have to read one of them.
No, I won't let you. Yeah. I mean, don't you guys want to win a field sharpener? And
man.
You're not going to do that with the poop stories. We've talked about this, and honestly, I don't even want to acknowledge them, Ben. I feel like it's just encouragement, bringing it up.
This one came from Jeremy Miner, and Jeremy says, "I submit for your pleasure a shitty, not so sharp moment. Picture this in your mind, if you will. I was new to hunting and was invited by a buddy to partake in a December deer drive with a college buddy and his family. On one particular drive, I asked, "Where should I stand?" My buddy proceeds to tell me, "Just walk along the timberline fence next to the waterway until you see a pile of spent shells from a previous hunt. You could stand there." So I did just that and started walking to my spot. It was my first time actually deer hunting, and I was excited. I was walking through some marsh grass with no issues. But as I got close to where I thought I was supposed to stand, I heard a squishing sound. My next step would be one I would never forget. As I took one more step, it felt like I fell into a sinkhole. I found myself up to my waist in what I thought was mud. How you feeling, Phil?
I'm going to take a big swing here and guess that it's not mud.
Picture the old Vietnam movies where soldiers are holding their weapons high above their heads while crossing a river. That was me. As I stood there, up to my waist with a old 20 gauge held high over my head, I caught a good whiff of a rank stench. As I crawled out, I realized I did not sink into a pit of mud. As my eyes and nose started to burn, I realized quickly I was in a lot of shit. A literal pit of shit.
A shit pit.
I'm done. I quit. I can't. I was going to be a serious journalist. You know, when I was in college, people would ask me, "What are you going to do?" I would say, like, change the world. And
you're saying you're not proud of this, Ben? You're not proud of what you've built here?
I feel like I'm in a similar shit pit right now. And I can't get out of it.
Me too.
I can't get out of it. But let's put our rifles above our heads and move on. You see, I had actually stepped into a spot where an old leach bed tile had been laid decades ago. This tile happened to be connected to a nearby dairy barn, so as you can imagine, it was ripe. There was nobody around, and I knew the deer drive was beginning, so I leaned forward and laid my belly to try to wiggle myself free from my pit shit situation. After a minute or two, I could feel myself slowly coming free, and I was able to pull my legs out of this stinky sludge. I managed to get myself completely out, but it wasn't good. Ripe dairy cow shit covered me from the waist down. I was soaked, cold, and coated in a thick layer of sludge. As I stand there trying to shake the shit clumps off of my pants and boots, trying not to gag and not get my hands or shotguns messy, I realized no deer should be able to ever smell me. So I stood there waiting to finish the deer drive. All of a sudden, from downwind, a nice 10-point buck came up from behind me and stopped at about 20 yards. It stood there sniffing the air, trying to figure out if there was a human close by or just some dumbass who fell in some shit. It was my first experience with a deer that close ever in the wild. The drive finished and the buck got away. Wait a minute. The drive finished and the buck got away? How did that happen? But, he says, but the stench from my shit-soaked pants and boots remained. My friends gathered around to point, laugh, and eventually gag at my situation. There was no way a vehicle ride was going to happen, so I began the slow waddle of shame back up the field to deer camp. My friends were waiting with a hose ready to begin the process of cleaning up my mess. The pants and undies went straight into the trash. Luckily, I happened to be the same size as another guy in camp who offered a clean, fresh pair of old jeans to get me home. No undies were offered, so I was told to just keep that pair of jeans. The boots had to be power washed off and were able to be salvaged, but they rode in the back of the truck. It was a fantastic day that led to my deeper passion for friends, family, and hunting white-tailed deer. I'm so happy to say I've been hunting with this group of jackasses ever since, and they've supplied plenty of not-so-sharp moments, including someone getting hit in the eye from a baseball pitch of a hand warmer, and someone getting stitches because he tried to open a sleeve of crackers with a buck knife that slipped from his hands and stuck in his leg. You get the picture. When we do deer drives at this location, Miner's Shithole is a specific spot on the map that brings back a good laugh and a burn to the eyes and nostrils. Keep up the good work. Jeremy. Play the jingle, Phil.
Work sharp, not so sharp moments, sharp so you don't have to be. Season 2! Yeah!
All right, well, we landed in the middle there, buddy. It was a shit story, but it wasn't of the human variety, so I think we're in the clear.
That's the only reason I'm giving it a pass, but I'd like to officially put an end to the shit stories starting right now. Yay!
Yeah, we're never going to do it again.
We did it.
People are annoyed.
It's over. If you send in a shit story expecting a field sharpener, you will not receive one.
You will not receive one. But Jeremy will receive one, and he'll receive one from our friends at WorkSharp. He's going to get a field sharpener. We're going to ship it right to his house, be able to sharpen knives and do all kinds of crazy things with it in the field. He can go over to their YouTube page and check out their weekly sharpening tips and all the other content at their YouTube page. Check their website out. Generally, please support our advertisers because they support us, and without them, we do not do this whole thing. So, moving on to more not so sharp moments in the woods of a more serious nature. We're going to get ourselves over to Giannis and Sam to talk about wound loss and archery, elk, and beyond. Please enjoy. All right, guys, we are going to talk about some important stuff now. Like we always do here on THC, we'll introduce our panel, maybe not including Phil because we just heard that he still hasn't completed his hunter safety course, so he can't really commentate on this issue. But first, Sam Lundgren. Hey, Sam.
Howdy, Ben.
The great Giannis, the Eagle Patelis. Hey, Yanni.
Whoa, I didn't get a setup like that.
Yeah, and in the future, you can just say just Yanni, too. I'm cool with that.
Okay, I thought I needed to. I always want to build you up, Sam.
You don't have to. You don't even have to call me sir or mister. Just Yanni is good.
Okay, I can do that for you, Sam. You got to get yourself a good nickname like that.
Well, you can't come up with your own nickname, Ben.
That's not true because that's how the Latvian Eagle started.
Oh, you came up with your own nickname.
But I didn't propose it as a nickname for myself.
Mm-hmm.
I just made a joke that the Latvian Eagle had not spotted anything after I had come back from a glassing session, and it just sort of stuck.
Well, for Sam, he's in listeners obviously won't be able to see this, but he's in a room with two pronghorns kind of flanking him on either side. So we could call you the pronghorn.
Yes.
Phil, edit that out. That was a bad idea.
The bad idea.
I was already planning on it.
Cut that. You got to cut that out. And there's Philip, the engineer. Say hello, Philip.
Hey, how's it going?
Oh, it's going really good.
Great.
Once again, for all you listeners, we're on Squadcast. They're not a sponsor, so if this doesn't sound good or it's all messed up, it's their fault. And we'll keep on going here. We're going to talk about something today that I don't want to pat ourselves on the back too early for really digging into this, but I do want to start by saying this. I believe this is something that isn't quite covered enough in hunting media. It's something we could all think about a little bit more, plan for a little bit more, understand a little bit more on a lot of levels. And so and it's happened to almost every hunter that I know that goes out in the field at any regular clip. It's happened to me. It's happened to Sam. It's happened to Yanni. Happened to Ryan Callahan last year. Happened to Steve Ranella if you watched our Colorado episode of Netflix. And his was the muzzleloader. So this is I don't know how we would couch it. Yanni, would you call it a common occurrence? How would you kind of describe wounding an animal and not recovering it in terms of frequency, I guess? Relevancy.
Yeah, and it's certainly higher with different animals and different methods of take, but I'd say that it's a constant. How's that for frequency?
That's a good one. That's a good one. Sam, when you're thinking about this, is this something that I could tell you that even this elk season, as we ran around Montana, a third of the people I talk to that are regular hunters that do it as much as the folks of us here that have taken our hunter safety courses do it. It's a third of the people have wounded an elk that I've talked to this year. What's your thoughts? Just like a general collection of the people that you talk to.
It wouldn't be dissimilar to what you've heard, and I've been lucky to live here in Montana a bit longer than you have, and it's like that every year. Every year I hear about a dozen or more hunters who hit elk with arrows and then don't find them.
Yeah, and I think as Yanni mentioned, archery tackle plus the toughness, the historic toughness of an elk will do that, and maybe up the frequency a little bit in regards to wounding loss. But we all have stories about it, so we're going to tell some stories and talk about specific instances and certainly try to highlight the emotions and kind of the way that you think about this, because when we use the word wounding loss is really the feeling that I've had in the past. It's a true feeling of loss because it's, one, you value the animal, you value the meat, you value the experience, and losing wounded game it absolutely dampens that entire experience from the beginning to, of course, the end result. So, it's something I take rather seriously. We've talked about it on this show a couple other times, but never kind of really in depth from a lot of angles. That's what we're going to do. Sam, do you want to Sam has the most recent occurrence of this. I don't know if we'll call it loss because you ended up finding the animal, but you did lose a ton of important and delicious elk meat in the process.
Yeah. So let's see. I guess that was mid to late September. John Dombeck, our data and analytics guy here at Meat Eater, and I just tried to sneak out for a before work hunt, pretty close to our houses. Started hiking at like 4 a.m, got way up over this mountain and dropped into some super elky country. And I bugled once and had just a big nasty bugle response, that one of those where it's just like, oh man, that's a big bull. And we charged down into where he was. He kept piping off, and we got inside about 100 yards. And then I was set John up kind of in between and downwind, tried to cow call this bull in through this really dense cover, but he hung up, wouldn't come any further. I could tell he was about 50 yards off, but he was just bugling, telling the cow to come over to him. And then finally I decided to cut him off with a bugle, and then he took off uphill, and I saw John kind of throw up his hands, and I was like, no, let's chase him. I said, come on. And I just went running up the hill, smashing through the brush. I thought John was right behind me. But it turns out the bull had just gone uphill to try to outflank us. He was coming right back down at me, just trying to be uphill, trying to have the dominant position. And I basically just walked out into just a slight little clearing, and there he was standing there looking at me at 30 yards. And I mean, I was in full fusion camo with a face mask up and arrow already on the string, and he was looking right at me, but just didn't really see me. He was kind of stepping out into the open right as I was. And I drew, and there was a little bit of a bush covering up his vitals. And I was was waiting for him to take one more step, and he took that step, and I was holding right on his rib cage. I always try to count a couple ribs back from the shoulder, and I let the arrow fly. And right as I did, all I remember is just kind of a flash of color, and he just kind of spun and took off. Within all of that, I couldn't really see the flight of my arrow, but I know it went the direction I, told it to. But I thought I missed. I didn't hear the thwack that you look for, that you want to hear with an arrow impact. And I was kind of stunned. It all happened really fast, and then 5 minutes later, John finally crushed up through the brush to me and sees me with, my hat off and stuff. He goes, what happened? I was like, I just shot at that bull. He's like, what? You saw it again? I thought it was gone. So he was, probably 40 yards behind me. Hadn't even had any idea that I'd had that direct interaction with it. We walked up, and we were just, going to look for my arrow, because like I said, I thought I missed because I didn't hear the impact, but there's my arrow laying there covered in blood, and there's big spurts of blood all over the place. And we're like, well, what do you know? Looks like I did tag him.
So was it clear there was a full pass through at that point?
It was, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it wasn't. It was clearly not lung blood. There weren't bubbles in it, but it was also clearly not gut blood because it didn't have that smell. So it was a little bit hard to parse. And like I said, I just didn't get a clear view of the arrow impact because the bull kind of spun at the sound of the bow. Like, I know the arrow flew straight, but the bull reacted to the sound of the bow going off and took off. So it just, I didn't really know what to think. But we waited for an hour and a half. We both kind of called into work to let folks know what was afoot and that we might not be sitting at our laptops hammering away right first thing at 9 a.m. I mean, and this was, I think, 8:15, 8:30 in the morning. So we gave it quite a while. I'm always super cautious with elk, not to try to blood trail too quickly and bump them. But then we started off on the blood trail. Pretty dense stuff, lots of blown down and burnt trees. But it was pretty good blood. I like to go along, and wherever I find blood, I put a stick in the ground so that I can line up those sticks later on. If I lose blood, I can kind of get a feel for the general direction of travel. We followed that blood trail for, I believe, about 300 or 400 yards, kind of uphill and kind of over this rise. And then it kind of just started to trickle out to pinpricks and then just disappeared. And we were down on our hands and knees for quite a while trying to pick it up because it was kind of at a divergence. It was like there was a major game trail going off one way, a major game trail going off another way. The feeling that I got from the general direction of travel was more of like a left trajectory, which would have made sense going downhill into a bit of a swampy kind of waterhole wallow area. And so we left our stuff at the last blood, and I started tracking myself on Onyx, and I had John track himself, and we went off in kind of the natural fall lines, the natural ways we would have thought it might have gone, and then just started doing loops, trying not to cover the same country twice by looking at our tracks. So I was really deliberately trying to grid out the country, trying to cover everything because you know how those high mountain forests are. It can kind of start to look pretty uniform after a while. We kept looking, just couldn't pick up any more blood. Couldn't find the animal. We went back and kept, just scouring the area around the last blood, trying to pick up that next drop to give us a sense of the trajectory. But, all of a sudden it's like noon, 1 o'clock, and John had work piling up and a big meeting he had to lead later that afternoon. We were both out of water. We were both out of food because, it was going to be a morning hunt. Wanted to be light. We had to climb 2,000 feet up in the dark. And, but we got pretty stressed out by the whole situation, ended up slugging down a bunch of water and a bunch of food. And, I had responsibilities. John had responsibilities. And we ended up making the call to back out, figuring the animal went a ways and we didn't want to push it, which I feel is a pretty standard decision to make. A lot of people will do that. You want to kind of give it a minute, come back with a fresh mind. So we ran home. I busted out a bunch of work. John did his meeting. We were able to, talk to a bunch of coworkers and see if anybody wanted to come help us look. Spencer Newharth volunteered. And we headed back in around 4:30. Me a little bit ahead of, I got there a little early and they came up and met me. Got back up, looked until dark, couldn't find any more blood, kept doing big loops through the country. But I packed overnight gear, thinking that might happen. So they walked out. I spent the night just under the stars at the point where I found the last blood. and woke up again at first light and just kept looking, kept doing loops, kept, keeping my eye on the Onyx track and just, trying to fill in the blanks in the just kind of the broad array of directions where he could have gone. Then about
Sam, I got a question.
Ahead.
When you're doing that gridding, what's your like average distance between track lines that you're trying to, keep so that you're not going, too far that you're missing something, but not like right on top of itself? Do you have a number that you kind of shoot for?
Yanni, it was a little bit more frenetic than that. I didn't have anything in particular. I was just at a relatively tight zoom range. I was trying to keep it probably about 50, 75, 100 yards off of my other tracks. But my first tracks were just kind of zigzags all over the place. We were just running through the country, just trying to cover as much of it as we could. And so then after that, I was trying to just do my best to cover in the blank spots after that.
And so you slept out. You just roll out a sleeping bag and just lay under the stars.
Yeah. Didn't bring a tent. It had gotten pretty warm that day. It had been pretty cool the day before, and it was very cool the rest of the week, but it did get warm that day. Is when we had a bunch of smoke, but the wind kind of blew out the smoke that day, and it was direct sunlight.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
Well, you when you're laying out there at night, like your confidence wanes. I always try to think of like, when do I start the grid search, and when do I narrow in on just a blood trail? Like what's that? What's the dividing line between those two things? And at the same time, you got to think about like people should hear from you. Like, during that evening, what are you thinking? You're laying out there thinking, I'm screwed here. This is a waste of time. Or like, what's going through your head?
Oh, what was going through my head is just like, I can't believe this is happening again. This happened to me once before, and I, really didn't ever want to let it happen again. I really swore to myself that it wouldn't happen again, that I would only make really good shots on elk, that I would always be as close as I could. I would practice as much as I possibly could. I would shoot my broadheads as often as I could, because that's, a giant differential that a lot of people fail to account for, that broadheads just don't fly like field points. So I was beating myself up left and right. I was in a really bad place mentally. I was just extremely upset. I barely slept that night. I was when first light started to, kind of illuminate the landscape a little bit. I was just sitting there awake, and got up and started looking again.
Yeah, that's a feeling that. Now we'll let you finish your story, but I do want to talk about like that feeling, and if it's comparable to anything else in life, because it's a shitty feeling. I mean, you can describe it in many ways, but I've certainly had it before too, where you just can't sleep. You don't know. You're replaying the story you just told. You end up replaying that story in your head every time you close your eyes. You're like, oh, if I only could have, why didn't I? Just questioning yourself.
Yeah. And the hardest part about that is when you don't have, you don't necessarily have some sort of error to point to. I made what I felt like was a good, clean, ethical broadside shot. The arrow went exactly where it was supposed to go. It passed cleanly through the elk. I'm not sure where it passed through the elk, but 30 yards is a chip shot. I don't take shots past 40 yards in the field, but I feel like 30 is well within my wheelhouse. And it was, I felt like I had him dead to rights. I felt like I did everything right. I knew I didn't push him. off a bed or anything. We waited nearly 2 hours before following the blood trail in a significant way. So, sometimes when you can look at a mistake and have that to point to, then you can seek to correct that mistake the next time. But when there's a lack of, learning or, some lesson in it, but the lesson is obscured, it makes it more difficult to process mentally.
Yeah. So Sam, he was so chewed up, you couldn't tell where the impact was when you found him?
Yeah. Yeah, it was right at the back of the rib cage, so it was liver blood that I was looking at.
Oh, so you do know that you hit him back?
Yep.
O'Reilly Auto Parts are in the business of keeping your car on the road. O'Reilly Auto Parts offer friendly, helpful service and the parts knowledge you need for all your maintenance and repairs. If you're confused about what part you need, like what wipers are going to be the best, what replacement headlights are going to be the best, go into O'Reilly and talk to the people that work there because they're great and they're super friendly and they'll get you squared away where you walk out knowing you got the right thing. They've got thousands of parts and accessories in stock, either in-store or online, so you never have to worry if you're in a jam. Do you need your windshield wipers replaced? You need a brake light fixed? You need some quick service? They'll help you find the right part or point you to the nearest local repair shop for help. The professional parts people at O'Reilly Auto Parts are your one-stop shop for all things auto do-it-yourself, and you can find what you need in-store or online. Stop by O'Reilly Auto Parts today or visit us at O'ReillyAuto.com/MeatEater. That's O'ReillyAuto.com/MeatEater. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today. You ever get that feeling you're stuck inside staring at screens and a primal urge kicks in? You crave wide open spaces, fresh air, the chance to connect with the land. Well, maybe it's time to find your own piece of the wild, but searching for property can be a maze. That's where Land.com comes in. They got millions of listings across the country, from mountain ranches to hidden fishing holes. Their search tools are like a seasoned guide helping you narrow down what you want. Land.com isn't just about buying and selling. It's about finding a place to hunt, fish, explore, or simply sit by a campfire and listen to the crickets. So head over to Land.com today to turn one day into today, because trust me, there's nothing quite like the feeling of standing on your own piece of earth.
Yanni, do you ever have that sense when you're in a situation like this where you feel like you've done everything, just about everything you can do, and maybe the animal did something you didn't expect, or it just circumstances like where there's just you have no control over the outcome sometimes? No matter much you practice, how much you think about this, how much critical you are of yourself.
Well, I mean, there's always things that are out of your control. It just depends on what part of the story or the the process, which part you want to talk about, because you can only control so much, and as much as we all think we can even control our own brains and emotions in the moment of truth, as they call it, when you're taking the shot. Even that sometimes gets away from us. And, that's why when I'm shooting, especially these days, I shoot fewer arrows, and I just try to take a solid minute or two between every single arrow. And that way, when I put an arrow on my string, I'm thinking like, okay, this is the one. Make sure that this is the one that is going to go exactly where you want it to be. And I like to go weeks on end where I don't have a bad hit on a target. And last night, actually, I was shooting and had an instance where I had been holding probably a little bit longer than I usually do. And then the wind kind of kicked up and it blew my bow off a target a little bit. and I came back to it, and I was starting to like lose my back strength a little bit, and I could feel that I was collapsing. And what I should have done is let down and then refocus and try it again. But instead, I lost focus, and my brain, was just like, nah, you can still pull this off, And I shot, and it ended up what would have been like a very far forward, like brisket shot, might have been into the cavity, maybe not. I mean, it's hard to tell when you're shooting at a deer target, but yeah, I don't know. It just depends on what part of it all you want to talk about that you can or cannot control. I mean, I've been on blood trails and where you think you're going to find them, and then all of a sudden it just starts raining that turns into snow, and it gets dark, and the next morning there's 8 inches. It doesn't matter if it's 2 inches or 8 inches, but there's so much snow on the ground that there is no more trailing at that point. And so it goes from like being a blood trail into a grid search, like Sam was just describing. And that's totally out of your control. I mean, there are people that if you knew that weather was coming, and I think all of us that should like adjust what sort of shot you're going to take, right? Where it's 4 p.m. and it's going to be dark in 3 hours, and you have rain that's going to turn into snow overnight. You should probably only be taking shots where you're like, when I release this arrow, that elk or deer or whatever is only going to go 20 or 50 or 100 yards and keel over and die. Like, there's not going to be any, like, I wonder if this shot's going to kill him instances, right? Because that there's a higher chance that if you're on a blood trail, you're going to end up losing it. So, yeah, I don't know. I think the answer to your question is very difficult. There's just so much that's out of your control. And it just points to the fact that we should all do our best when we're practicing and when we're in the moment of truth of controlling what we can control and being as good at it as we can.
Yeah. That's a skill in of itself, man. That's a skill very much akin to sports. Being able to perform in the, to do what you've practiced in a pressure filled moment. Like that's not too far away from an analogy to a basketball player, football player, somebody that, it's all on the line and you got to do it. For them, it's just a fake trophy, but yeah, in this case, there's real consequences. So, but I guess in control, what I had in my head based on Sam's story up to this point is that moment when you release the arrow, you put the arrow exactly where you wanted. Just so happens the animal is not in the spot where it was when you pulled the trigger or released the arrow at this point. So as much as you can't control the rest of the scenario, even the scenario where you're 30 yards from an elk, and I think the dynamics of calling an elk certainly change this a bit because they're moving into you, across from you. That it's not sitting in a tree stand shooting down at a deer walking down a trail when he doesn't know you're there. So I just think even the moment of kill, which I want to talk about this idea of fair kill rather than fair chase. Even at the moment of kill, even when that arrow releases, if it flies through the hole in the timber that Sam shot through, and you think, perfect, that's a dead elk, and that elk spins, takes a step, reacts in a certain way, your lack of control, even in that micro scenario, is clear. So,
yeah, it's enough to throw it off, and you can't beat yourself up for it. I mean, if you're honest with yourself and you really did everything that could be done, and you bear down and you took the extra time to make the shot, and you can say, no, I did not rush it, and my pin was rested, and the animal was there, and the animal wasn't aware of me. That's a big thing too, right? Where if you're on an animal and he's like aware of you, and he's like, they're going to most likely there could jump or wheel. So that's, again, something to be considered in that moment of truth. It gets tough. But again, yeah, you're totally right. If you're honest with yourself and you say you did everything to the best of your ability, and then the animal spins, or there is a branch that you couldn't see, even though Sam said there was a branch there. There's certainly times I did it with a rifle once, where like I shot a deer and did not kill the deer, didn't even hit him, and turns out that I shot it was like a 2-inch sapling that just was not registered by my brain as it was. That was in front of its vitals. So
Yeah. Well, Sam, give us the update and let's hear the rest of the story, because I think the end when you actually find this elk is interesting as anything. But keep on going.
Yeah. So like I said, I just kind of kept trying to fill in the grid that next morning, and I think it was right around 8:30, 8:45 the next morning, so about 24 hours after the shot. I was walking through this kind of low meadow and caught a smell, a scent of something dead. It was pretty faint, but you know it when you smell it. And I pulled out my little wind checker, because there wasn't a definitive wind direction that I could really take note of. And so I was just puffing and then going in the exact opposite direction of the, the dust from my wind checker going upwind, kept going up this little gully. Following that, the scent got stronger. And then all of a sudden I came over a rise and there was just chaos and commotion. And I had brought my dog in with me that night. Not that he's, a blood trailing dog or anything, just thinking, he has a better nose than I do. And I wanted a little bit of company sleeping out overnight. He starts going nuts. But pretty quickly I realized that there were just bears everywhere in this little gully. I didn't even at first register that there was a dead elk on the ground, but obviously made sense. But I saw, so kind of as the picture became clear, I saw a big sow black bear. She was woofing at me up on her hind legs about 75 yards off, and then I registered that she had 2 year-old cubs up a tree kind of right by her. And so I was like backing off, going, whoa, whoa, whoa. I had my pistol drawn, the safety off my bear spray too on my hip, and just kind of backing off, giving them some space. And then I hear a big whoosh, and it's straight above me. And I looked up and saw another probably 150-pound black bear up a tree directly above my head that I had like backed up to. So there's 4 bears in there. 3 of them had gone off one way, 1 had gone another way, and I was right underneath one of them. And that kind of threw me into a different level of kind of concern for the situation. I backed out a little bit further, yelling the whole time, but letting them know that they could get out of their trees. And as soon as I saw that bigger one come out of the tree, I kind of rushed it a little bit and shouted, and it ran off, and the cubs had come down and they ran off, and I just kind of made a big scene, fired my pistol once into the ground, just kind of for good measure, and claimed the carcass. My bull was lying there, by far the biggest bull elk I've ever killed. It's a really cool animal, really old. As Ben, I think Ben, you said he's probably, kind of in regression, probably used to be bigger than he was now. His bases are like 6-8 inches around.
It's the kind of it's the kind of elk, if you've been out there a long time doing it, that you really want to kill. I mean, it's just not only the uniqueness of what was on its head, but obviously the age and just the it's just by the head that I saw later on, just a gnarly old bull by the looks of his skull and his antlers.
Yeah, tough motherfucker. But he had, it was completely rotten. Bears had eaten a pile of meat off of him, so he was just torn apart, rotten. I mean, the ground around him was moving with maggots. It was very, very gruesome. I was just devastated. I mean, I was crying. I was very, very upset. And I had been going light and fast. I didn't carry my pack with me when I went out looking that morning, because I just wanted to be moving fast, covering as much country as I could. So I didn't have didn't have a sharp knife. So I like needed to walk away for a second. I walked back to my pack. He had gone about another half a mile, maybe, from the last blood. And I followed very clearly along the major game trail he had followed, seeing just no blood at all. And I went and got my knife and my pack and my stuff. And I came back again, looking again, just zero blood, zero, I mean, there's a lot of elk in that country. So, there's elk sign, but nothing really distinctive as like that big bull. And coming back in again, one of the bears had already returned and I had to run it off again. But I was looking at my OnX track and I had walked within 150 feet of him the day before, when John and I were up there that morning, and it's just such thick, dense country. And I was just kind of over a little rise in the next gully and I just didn't see him. I was damn close to just walking right up to him. If I had been just 30 yards to the east and higher up on a little finger, I definitely would have seen him, but I didn't.
30 yards, man. Yeah. I don't know. That's got to be the part of the toughest part, is knowing how close in so many ways you were to, just if he would have bled just a little bit more, if you'd have been 30 yards, or if that arrow would have been a couple inches, to the left, what the outcome would have been.
Yeah. And I was looking at, I was able to see the exit wound, and it was basically a clean path through, kind of perpendicular to the animal. And it hit at the back of the rib cage, exited back at the rib cage, but that exit wound was tiny. I mean, it just sealed up, as you hear people say, but it just sealed up. There wasn't really any blood coming out of it. It was mid body, not the shot you aim for, but a completely lethal shot. I mean, I'm guessing he probably took an hour or two to die. But he ran about 3/4 of a mile and laid down and died. So, I mean, that's what you kind of have to expect from elk. I've killed 4 bulls with my bow and I mean, even the most perfect double lung pass through, they still run a couple hundred yards. The first bull I ever killed, I shot through the heart with a 30-06 at 80 yards, and he still ran 100 yards and then took a header off a cliff. They're just tough animals. And, if I had had good blood, we would have had him for sure. If I had just veered off a little in another direction, looking that first day, I would have had him for sure. But yeah, so I ended up cutting the head off, skinning it out, notching my tag, and walking out of there. And, I had already decided the day before that I was going to notch my tag, whether or not I found him, because I knew I'd drawn blood, likely in a lethal manner. And I had already decided that I was done elk hunting for this year. And I mean, I had a moose tag this year, so I had a lot of other things to do, but, I was devastated, felt awful. And I felt like, that was kind of the punishment I was going to lay on myself. I felt like it was the ethical thing to do, but I felt like I needed to kind of lash myself a little bit because I had messed up or I hadn't done things right, even though I still can't quite put my finger on what exactly I did wrong in the moment, but I felt like that was necessary. But since I'd already made that decision, I decided to carry the antlers out of there. But, I don't look at them as a trophy or a prize or something that I'll display with the same level of pride that I do with other elk. It's almost as a reminder, but, yeah, so that was that.
Yeah. I don't know. I can definitely relate on a lot of levels to that last point you made, because I don't, if a kill doesn't go well, if the killing of an animal doesn't go well and it's my fault, even if, I shot at a mule deer last year 8 times. Come to find out, the rifle I was using had some copper fouling in the barrel and just wouldn't hold a group number. Or what I did, and ended up having to take it to a gunsmith. But at the time, I didn't know that. And the deer didn't go more than 100 yards.
Had you not shot that gun, Ben?
Yeah, we shot that gun. Yep, Sam Soholt and I shot that gun, and I was hitting rocks at 500 yards right prior to that. So then it just changed overnight. It was about 2 or 3 days later, and there was a bunch of snow. It went from 60 degrees to 25 degrees in a blizzard. So that could have been it. It also could have been nothing to do with that fouling. It could have been everything to do with me. But the next bear season, I took the gun out to try to sight it in, and it wouldn't hit a piece of cardboard at 100 yards, 200 yards. And so there's no way for me to know if that was me or a combination of both things. But definitely, Sam was there. We went through. It was basically a blizzard that opening day last year.
Sure was.
Yeah, so it was cold and wet, and who knows what it was. But I mean, I shot it 8 times, but it didn't go more than 100 yards from where I first pulled the trigger on it, and it didn't suffer for more than 5 or 10 minutes after I hit it the front leg the first time. And then I was shooting at it through a bunch of thick brush to try to put it down, and so it was a rodeo. It was not. It didn't make me proud in terms of my end of it, and it was a decent buck, and it was a tough hunt, in a really cool area with some good buddies. But still, when I look at that deer, I just kind of think about my own failure and the ridiculousness of shooting 8 times at a mule deer. I don't think of like how cool it was. Those other factors that were badass. I think about why the hell am I shooting 8 times at a deer? That's ridiculous. For whatever the reasons were. So now when someone asks you how many bullets do you take into the field, what's your answer? I take a whole box.
You go for 20.
I go for 20. I've always just taken a whole box.
You've been a 20 guy your whole life?
Mostly always, yeah. Mostly always. I'll have a box. I'll have, a couple in my pocket, of course a full mag in the rifle, and then the rest of the box in my pack, almost always. Because you never know. You never know what's going to happen. You might have to resight your gun in on the fly. That's good to have. It's good to be prepared in that way. But, there again, it's like these are ridiculously, like they're embarrassing. You feel like, man, I think about hunting all the time. I've been shooting rifles since I was 12. What in the world is going on? That's not fair to that deer that I couldn't get my stuffs together to make that happen. And in that case, I pulled the trigger the first time and was looking at that deer waiting for him to drop, and the guys I was with we don't see where you hit, and I pulled the trigger again, we don't see where you hit. I pulled the trigger again and hit him in the leg. So it was a confusing, frustrating, pissed me off moment. But I say all that to say, like, I know what Sam's feeling in terms of when you look at that deer, you're not thinking, man, I can't wait to tell somebody the story of this one. It's going to be great. There's some like modicum of shame there that you got to deal with when you're looking at it. So that's certainly part of it. But we should talk about this notching tags when you don't recover an animal, or even when you do. In your case, Sam, I think your notching of a tag is probably. So, well, I guess the point is you had planned to notch your tag before you found the bull, right?
Yeah. I had told myself when I walked out of there, come hell or high water, I wasn't going to have a valid elk tag.
And we know there's a good article that we've all read, and it's been some time since this was published on themeateater.com, but a good article by our good friend and writer Pat Durkin about wounding loss. And depending on what state you're in, game agencies, when they put together their population data and they put together their tag allotment and those things for the year and for the units, they're assuming some wounding loss and building that into their set data set. And so from a practical standpoint, you can say, well, I wounded this animal, that's part of it, and that is taken into account by the folks that that afforded me this tag or allotted me this tag out of the larger group of tags that were sold. And so I'm going to keep hunting because that's what essentially that's what is in the plan for them and maybe should be in the plan for me. But I imagine when people are notching tags, they're notching tags for more personal reasons than practical. You feel like that's true, Yanni?
Yeah, for sure.
Have you notched tags before on things you didn't recover?
I never have.
Oh,
never have. But I don't know if I've ever been faced. Well, I mean, I was telling you before we started that 2 years ago, I guess I was faced with that scenario, and I chose not to notch my tag. And even after if I can really quickly tell my story of archery hunting.
Please.
And then I can tell you sort of my decisions that I made after it. But it was like the first or second night. My hunting partner was actually packing a bull out, so I was out by myself, and ended up getting a great shot, like exactly 40 yards on the mark, on a 4x5. I had ranged the log that he was going to step over ahead of time. I told myself if he goes to that log and stops near it, I'm like, it's money. It's 40 yards, and had been shooting a lot that summer. Felt really good, and took the shot and hit him exactly where I wanted to hit him. If I had to do it all over again, I wouldn't change a single thing. Just pretty much like saw the red spot, and I'm thinking to myself, smoked him. Well, he wheels and he turns and he's running off, and I'm like, man, I don't really have that great of arrow penetration. Like I can see a solid foot, maybe more, maybe half my arrow. I shoot a pretty long arrow. It's almost 30 inches. So if half my arrow was in him, that was 15 inches. And he runs off. And I'm thinking, man, like that was not great penetration. And so I was going to give him a little bit longer. I was going to give him like a couple hours, and then it started to rain. And so I think I had like 90 minutes. I'm like, okay, I'm going to at least go to where I last saw him, see what kind of blood I can find, just kind of assess the situation. So I go over, I find my arrow. It's got nice pink frothy blood on it, fair amount of blood on the ground. I pick it up and I just kind of peek over a little rise, and I see the bull down below me, and he takes off, and I can hear him sort of breathing through that hole in his side where you can sort of hear air moving through an animal it's not his mouth, and he runs off. And I'm like, well, backing out for sure now, so I back out. The rain kind of continues, and it's getting dark. And at that point, I'm like, well, I'm just going to have to wait till the morning. Well, get up in the morning, and it was, I don't know, somewhere 6-8 inches of snow or so. And so I literally there was no blood trail. My hunting partner showed back up at, I don't know, it wasn't too late in the morning. It was 9 o'clock or so. And with the snow, it actually made gritting easy because, you can just walk a straight line and just kind of, when you come back, you just like, you can see your old tracks 10 yards away or whatever, and just, make another, pass. And we basically did that over, I don't know, until dark that night. And we probably covered, I don't know, maybe a square mile, and just tromped all over everything. But at that point, we were just looking for one antler that was going to be sticking up out of the snow, and probably just a bump in the snow that would, show us the body. And did not find it. Best I can tell you what I think happened is I probably got one lung. And with that kind of penetration, I don't know, but you never know. I feel like if I would have gotten two, like the way we gridded that area, I would have found him. But they can go a long ways on a lung. They can go a long ways and live on one lung. They can go a long ways and die on one lung. So I can't tell you what happened. Did not notch my tag. Continued to hunt. And then like 2 or 3 days later, I had a bull. We called a bull in, and he came by me, top pin range, and he was walking. And I thought I was good enough to just follow him as he walked and let my arrow loose. And that turned out to be a mistake. From here on out, I'll always try to stop an animal with a cow call or a grunt or something. and then settled my pin and shoot because what I thought was going to tuck in right behind his shoulder ended up hitting in that like I don't even think I got liver, so I was even behind the liver. The arrow basically showed hair and fat, zero blood, and he was in a giant meadow, like a meadow that's literally a mile long and probably, I don't know, 600-700 yards across. And so we were able to watch that bull, follow his trail, see that there was little to no blood. He actually hooked back up with 3 bulls that he had been feeding with earlier before we called him over to us, and went back to feeding and then slowly worked their way into the timber. So the next morning we followed that bull we had the fresh snow now, and I had like pin drops every, I don't know, 10 to 30 feet, like a pin drop. And we could stay on his track and find that pin drop. And we went over 2 ridges, and eventually his tracks ran into like a whole herd of elk tracks, and there was no more, following him. So at that point, we did quit hunting, but we were also at the end of the trip. Would I have punched my tag? I guess I didn't punch my tag because I hunted in rifle season and killed a bull. So that's how that went for me. Both of those times, I feel like, again, one long because we didn't find him. I'm guessing the bull lived. That shot that went right through him with what the arrow showed and the sign showed and the way he acted, like my guess is that it went through a space somewhere between his guts and the diaphragm. And again, didn't kill him. Do I know that for sure? No, there could have been some festering wound and he could have, perished months later. But again, like Sam said, man, they are tough. They take antler tines to their flanks all the time, and probably don't live through all of them, live through some of them. But yes, I think that's like the only time I've been faced with whether or not I'm going to like punch a tag. And on both those, I chose not to, and I actually filled my tag later with a bull tag. I think if I was in Sam's situation, and I found one of those bulls, even if it was later, if I had something to go on, and was able to had a zone that I could search and I had found him, even though it was wasted, if I was packing antlers out of the mountains, I'd notch a tag for sure.
Yeah.
But if I'm putting mega effort into it and signs are showing that it's 50-50 whether that animal's living or not, I'm not necessarily going to punch the tag. It's the sign and everything's going to have to tell me and show me where inside of me I'm like, you know what, more than likely that animal's dead.
Yep.
So
yeah, and I think for many people that travel out west or really travel anywhere, many outfitters, I've hunted with half a dozen outfitters I can think of that had this rule. If you draw blood, that's your tag. Many outfitters will enact that on private property. And I've always really agreed with that because I've been a part of some camps where there's a lot of wounded animals in a very short amount of time, and a lot of, you really want a client in that case to think really long and hard whether they want to pull that trigger. And because one of the things, I guess in returning maybe a little bit to the in the moment decision making, one of the things that happens on what I guess me and Clay Newcomb were calling transient hunts, where you have 7 days to hunt, right? Sam's hunt was in nearly his backyard, in his hometown. That tag goes until the end of the year, if you want to count shoulder seasons, even longer. And so he doesn't have a time restriction. But when a lot of people that are listening to this, when you're talking about, and maybe you can talk about this too, Yanni, being a guide, you have 6 days to hunt, and you're on your last day, or you have 3 days to hunt or 10 days to hunt, doesn't matter. You have a time limit, and that's the time you have to hunt that tag. I think a lot of times I've seen people at the very end of these hunts where you're traveling into a spot, you're willing to take shots you wouldn't otherwise, you're willing to do things you wouldn't otherwise, and a lot of times that turns bad for the animal and for the hunter. So I don't know. There's a lot of situations that kind of when we when it comes down to pulling the trigger that expand the scenarios on which you would do it, which you would pull the trigger, whether it's archery.
Yeah, I'd like to mention that it takes a very mature hunter to have that control in that situation time and time again. And you only become that way, I think, through lots and lots of experience, and people that have just, shot at a lot of things and then wounded a lot of things and killed a lot of things. And I personally, and certainly not there, even all that time I had as a guide, I got a lot of experience from it. But what I didn't get from it was having to control my own, emotions in the moment of truth, and so that's something that now I'm, kind of learning to do more of, because I'm getting to hunt a little bit more myself and not always, guiding other people. But there's I know very few hunters that are so good where they're like, yeah, I don't shoot 40 yards at an elk. And the reason they say that is because they've had all those experiences that we're talking about right now. They have a limit to where it's just in their mind, it's going to be 100%, and it's probably not going to be 100%. Nothing is in hunting, but in their mind, that's 100%. And every single moment, they might even pass at something at 15 yards because maybe it didn't stop moving or, whatever. Maybe because that second bull I shot, even though you grunt at him or cow call at him, maybe he doesn't stop and he just kind of keeps walking as he's looking at you. And again, you have to be not going to shoot until it's right. And it just takes a lot of experience to be in that moment and not want it so bad that you let your emotions take over.
That's such a good point. Wanting it so bad, no matter the scenario, no matter whether you've spent $10,000 on an elk hunt and this is your $10,000 and all the time and all the practice and all the gear you bought and all the pressure, that's one version, but there's so many other versions where those emotions come into play.
Well, and we tell people all the time that you've really got to want it really bad. I mean, that's the way I became a successful elk hunter. I went through a lot of failure trying to figure it out, trying to learn, just going all the time by myself. And it's that dogged desire to succeed that makes you good, but you need to learn to rein that in. At the moment of truth, right when it's finally coming together, the penultimate moment is when you can't want it too bad. But you also, at the same time, you have to capitalize on very brief windows of opportunity. And this bowl this year, it's a great example of that. I did have a good clean shot, but it was a quickly disappearing opportunity. And so you got to want it bad, but you can't want it too bad. So it's really difficult to parse where that line lies.
Sam, would you take that shot again? Everything being the same, would you shoot again?
Yeah. That's a shot that I would take. And I had a couple, and I wrote a long post about this on, Instagram, Facebook, and I had, most people kind of commiserate, but a couple holier than thou folks who I won't mention by name talking about, before I was a mature hunter and, I never do that kind of thing again. And you didn't read my story. I do not feel like I made a bad judgment call. I don't think I rushed the shot. I don't think it was a bad shot to take. I probably would have put knowing that he was on a hair trigger. I shoulder bladed a bull one time, totally non-lethally. I got 3 inches of penetration, and I looked for a couple days and saw that bull later, and he knocked the arrow out and was pushing cows again. So I felt like he had survived. So since then, I tried to move backwards from that shoulder to get away from that shoulder. But I mean, in a situation where they're on a hair trigger at close range, I might move it a little bit closer to the shoulder, I guess. I mean, there's some things to derive from this, but no, I don't. I would probably take that shot again and others like it.
Yeah. And I mean, you got to think of the situation, man. Then this goes back to we've had plenty of conversations on this show about ethics, and no matter how much you think about what ethics are and really how you would put them into practice, there's still the moment of truth. And what you just well described, Sam, is that penultimate moment where you are in control of what happens. And when you release that air, that ultimate moment, you're not really in control of much of it. And so there's this idea that I've been tracking with, that I think this conversation really leads to, which is, rather than maybe not in replacing fair chase, but in adding to it or making it a little bit more substantial in this penultimate moment, is this idea of fair kill. And fair kill is essentially, it's a million things. It's a million things. It's certainly the practice, the preparation, being able to understand the lethality of you personally with whatever weapon you're holding, but it's also being able to understand the impact of those decisions and try to train yourself mentally, in some instances physically, to make that decision, that penultimate decision, in all fairness, to the animal and not to yourself, not to give in to, as you guys both described, that emotion of wanting to get it done, needing to get it done. I spent all this money and all this time and all this emotion and sacrifice for this, and now I'm going to expand my ethical boundaries because I want it so damn bad. That's like the most natural, selfish reaction in that moment. And I think this idea of being fair to the animal in the moment of kill is the idea that you have to somehow, as hard as it is, and as to your point, Sam, to judge someone else for not doing it is holier than thou, but this idea of personally trying to hold yourself to some sort of fairness at that moment is impossibly hard as it just is. It's because some people are better. Some people are just, if you read psychology books, and listen to psychologists, some people are better in the moment. Some people are able to compartmentalize their emotions and have tunnel vision and focus on the moment. Some people are not. Some people are influenced by the existential at all times. So it's a tough thing, but that's one philosophy that I've tried to personally apply, and trying to make this work, and I still suck, but I'm trying.
Yeah, and it's so situational. Another example I'd like to share is my first archery bull was a substantially similar experience. I called it in to about 30 yards in dense timber and shot it through an even smaller window. Got one lung, got pretty good blood, but it was late. We were way up in the mountains. I was with my girlfriend at the time, and it crossed a creek in a swampy area, and then we couldn't pick up blood anymore, and she was getting freaked out. It was dark. She had to work in the morning. So we hiked all the way out of there and dropped her off and slept like 2 hours, and then picked up a buddy, and we went all the way back in there. And this was hours away from where I lived in Missoula. So, probably 2.5 hour drive, 3.5 hour hike in. But we went back in, spent hours trying to pick up the next blood. It had crossed this creek and taken a right angle and went downhill, and we were able to find it. I think it was 23 hours after the shot, and it was cold. There was some snow on the ground, and I lost maybe 3 pounds of meat around the ball joints. So same thing, left a blood trail because of responsibilities and just needing to kind of a mental reset. And I came back in and recovered that entire animal. And it was just a difference of air temperature between taking it all home and losing all of it. And I remember thinking the day after that if I killed it the day after that, I would have had that elk. So it was just the warm weather that was the difference.
Yeah, I've had a lot of those discussions. Mark Kenyon and I talked about this on this podcast last year, and I've talked about it with a lot of folks in the whitetail space. When I was coming up watching Hunter Specialties it wasn't even DVDs, it was videotapes and Real Tree Monster bucks and things like that. this is kind of the cadence of how it would go. They'd shoot the deer and be like, well, we got to let them lay. We got to, let's go back to the truck, give it about 4 or 5 hours, and we'll come back and we'll track them. That was always kind of how it went. And I think for new hunters, that can be a little bit confusing, especially when you're hunting in an evening, when you're going to leave something lay overnight. I had a situation in Iowa where I was filming a guy. He shoots this giant buck. I was filming it. I'm watching this arrow go in. I'm like, that buck ran right down in there and laid down for a couple hours and died. He was shot in the liver with a rage broadhead, and I was sure. And the hunter wanted to wait, and I wanted to go. And we had this, it was a friendly debate about it. It was his property, so I wasn't going to get the final call anyway, and his deer. And so we waited, and my argument was like, man, he said if we bump him, he's going to go to the neighbors, then we got problems. And I said, well, I think he's dead, and I really would like to get the meat out of this thing. And if we leave him lay, we've been seeing coyotes all week. Those coyotes are going to be on him. They're going to be right on him. So that was a discussion we had. He ultimately decided, because it was his deer and his property, that we were going to wait. He didn't want to push this deer onto the neighbors. We waited. We came back in the morning, and that deer was laying right where I thought he would be, half eaten by coyotes. And I think at some level that's a big part of that is exactly what you're talking about, Sam. How long do you leave something lay? What's the judgment call there? And do you risk pushing him and never finding him, knowing that you're probably going to lose some meat, in your case to black bears, but in that case to coyotes? There's a whole lot to that equation too, in terms of when do you set off and what kind of country you're in and all those types of things. So I think that's another important deal. And in that case, it was hot too.
O'Reilly Auto Parts are in the business of keeping your car on the road. O'Reilly Auto Parts offer friendly, helpful service and the parts knowledge you need for all your maintenance and repairs. If you're confused about what part you need, like what wipers are going to be the best, what replacement headlights are going to be the best, go into O'Reilly and talk to the people that work there, because they're great and they're super friendly, and they'll get you squared away where you walk out knowing you got the right thing. They've got thousands of parts and accessories in stock, either in-store or online, so you never have to worry if you're in a jam. Do you need your windshield wipers replaced? You need a brake light fixed? You need some quick service? They'll help you find the right part or point you to the nearest local repair shop for help. The professional parts people at O'Reilly Auto Parts are your one-stop shop for all things auto do-it-yourself, and you can find what you need in-store or online. Stop by O'Reilly Auto Parts today or visit us at O'ReillyAuto.com/MeatEater. That's O'ReillyAuto.com/MeatEater. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store, or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today. You ever get that feeling you're stuck inside staring at screens and a primal urge kicks in? You crave wide open spaces, fresh air, the chance to connect with the land. Well, maybe it's time to find your own piece of the wild, but searching for property can be a maze. That's where Land.com comes in. They got millions of listings across the country, from mountain ranches to hidden fishing holes. Their search tools are like a seasoned guide helping you narrow down what you want. Land.com isn't just about buying and selling. It's about finding a place to hunt, fish, explore, or simply sit by a campfire and listen to the crickets. So head over to Land.com today to turn one day into today, because trust me, there's nothing quite like the feeling of standing on your own piece of earth.
But I want to move on, maybe start with you, Yanni, because you've been doing this as long as anybody and have had an impact, via the Netflix show and Meat Eater and your work on that. I think the work that you do has a larger impact than a lot of people in our industry. Do you feel like we talk about this enough, across the media spectrum in hunting, across everything. If you were trying to tally up all the stuff you watch and listen to and think about in the hunting space.
And you're specifically just asking if we talk about wound loss?
Yeah. I mean, yes, this scenario where we are wounding an animal and losing it, and the ethics involved, and the notching of the tags, the general idea that hunters fail a lot in very serious ways.
Man, it's hard for me to say if it's certainly not growing up watching hunting media and reading hunting media. It didn't seem like it was part of the conversation. I feel that now that I'm a part of it, and certainly when I was even guiding a decade ago, it was certainly a part of the conversation in my crew. We happened to be guiding right when arrows made a big leap from heavy aluminum, giants to the speed freaks and, things of the early 2000s, and mid 2000s, when everybody started shooting really light, really fast, graphite arrows. Right. And, we saw it go from a lot of clean pass-throughs to these, Sam described earlier, where people were, and that was pass-throughs on shoulders. And then we'd get these shots with these fast arrows that would hit shoulders and go in 3 inches. And you just would watch them walk away. We wouldn't even start the blood trail. It was it wasn't even worth it. You'd be yeah, that one's gone, So we always had that conversation going a lot. And it's something that in a guide camp, you're maybe more aware of because you're seeing so much of it. And at the end of, every season you can tally it up and, someone's yeah, my guy shot 3 times and he maybe only hit once, didn't recover one. No, somebody else had one that, you know what I mean? So it was just easier to have that conversation around a lot. So I don't know. I feel now, at least amongst our crew, we talk about it a lot. Is it do I scroll through Instagram right now and see anybody? It's mostly dead animals that you see. And usually not dead ones like Sam's, where he's telling a bigger story there with a eaten carcass. It's usually just a guy with a fairly fresh looking elk and that's it. And it's congratulations. So I don't know. It's definitely, but I don't know. I mean, I haven't wounded something yet this year and lost it. And if I do, I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I'll probably post about it to share the story of, what happened. But yeah, overall, I don't know. I guess the question is does it need to be talked about more? Is there what's the value in it? Right.
Right.
It's certainly valuable, I think, in the hunting community to talk about it. Cause I think that, hopefully it just makes all of us practice more and be better at what we're doing.
Yeah.
But Jim Heffelfinger points out in that article that Pat wrote, it's all the other predators aren't held to the same thing of ethics and these kills, right? It's not every time a mountain lion jumps onto the back of a mule deer that thing dies. My buddy Jimmy over in Colorado, every other year, he's got a buck that'll be roaming the backyard all winter long. It's got a patch of hair missing off its rear end. How do you think that happened? A hunter didn't shoot it off. No, it got raked off by a mountain lion's claws. And now this deer's got to go through the whole winter with a 12-inch by 12-inch square patch missing out of his rear end where he doesn't have any insulation. And, most of the time, as far as he can tell, they live through it.
Yeah, but mountain lions don't practice in their backyards and listen to podcasts about wounding elk.
They don't. They don't. No, but by no means do they.
I think maybe the point that Jim's making that I agree with, and I think that you're backing up, is there is an acceptable amount of this just by what we're partaking in.
Totally.
We have to decide what the acceptable amount is for us personally, and why it happened is more of a personal endeavor. But in general, Another good quote in here in that article for Pat Durkin, and please go give that a read because it kind of lines out some of the good and bad in terms of wounding loss. But there's a ton of good quotes in here, but I think one of them it comes from Jim Heffelfinger, and it's really about, is it objective or subjective? And he talks about, he says, mortality varies greatly with hunter density, thickness of vegetation, terrain, and hunt structures. Like many mortality factors, the number of deer left in the field after the hunting season would be very difficult to estimate accurately, and any estimate would not be applicable to wide areas or subsequent years. And basically what he's saying is it's damn hard to figure this out. There's so many variables across the board to try to take like a percentage. And one of the variables was when are hunters admitting to this? And who are they telling? They would be having to tell them in the game and fish surveys that you get from most every state you buy a tag in or draw a tag in. You'd have to be admitting to this at some level, and who knows how truthful folks would be even in that sense.
But interestingly, all the surveys I've ever taken, whether written or the phone call you get in January, I don't think I've ever been asked a question about wound loss.
Me either. So how do you, are they generally just taking, there's some studies mentioned in that article, but they're just generally taking this idea of a certain percentage and applying it in a generalized fashion. He talks about a Penn State professor who said research in the past 20 years suggests that only 1% to 2% of deer shot by hunters aren't found, and that Pennsylvania, in this case, loses way more deer to cars and trucks than unrecovered hunting losses. And outside of hunting season, they say we might lose 5 to 12% tops to other factors, and that's mostly cars. And so there's just a ton. When it comes to the data side of things, I don't know that there's a whole lot we can talk about. It's a really tough thing that's never going to get pinned down in any real way that I can see based on a lot of these experts and what I've seen. And so then it just comes down to ethics and some of the other less tangible shit that we can talk about that we often do.
Yeah, but at the same time, one thing that really jumped out to me about that article was that he said, Pat spends a lot of time in this explaining how deer and elk ungulate populations are estimated and accounted for, and he was saying that Colorado estimates 15% wounding loss for bull elk. Colorado has the biggest elk population and the most elk hunting of any state, and they just across the board assume that 15% of bulls that are killed every year aren't being found. And so that varies pretty widely from some of the other states that are just talking about whitetail deer that account for a lot smaller.
Yeah.
Wounding loss accounts for a lot smaller percentage of the overall population loss every year. And I think it just goes to show that elk are incredibly difficult to bring down. They just have that strong will to live. And I mean, I've heard that from hunters my whole life, guys who have hunted all over the world in Africa and Asia, and they'll tell you that elk are one of the hardest to bring down, just have so much fight in them. And I mean, that's an intangible too, but I think it's really indicative that Colorado just across the board assumes that 15% of bulls won't be recovered. And I think it says that 25% of cows
That's right.
Yeah.
aren't recovered. And explain a lot of this is really cognitive, that you look a lot harder when you've got a bull on the line. Often when you're hunting cows, you're in kind of a group of them, and it's hard to tell what one did what.
Yeah, that makes
it's fascinating.
You also think like over the years, Colorado it's changing now, but has had as much over the counter activity from out of state hunters as any state. And you put that into those archery seasons being long, a lot of over the counter tags, a lot of elk, a lot of interactions. That number is going to go up. And then you got to add in there that elk are as tough as they are, as tough to bring down as they are. And then that number 15% seems very, very reasonable in terms of that particular situation. So to that quote I read by Jim, it's so hard. You couldn't apply the archery specific method of take, the game animal and the state. You'd have to, you can't compare really one to the other. And even probably with inside a state, if you have a very limited entry whitetail season and a wide open archery season for elk, the wound loss percentages are going to be way different even within that, with those two scenarios. So it's a tough thing to nail down for sure. But maybe back to the media point, because I do think, as much as I think this is kind of trite now, like, social media has a big impact on new hunters for sure. I mean, the term influencer exists for a reason. And I ran into a guy in a turkey camp years ago that shot and wounded a turkey with archery equipment, and in some way expressed to me that he had never seen. He didn't understand what wounding an animal looked like, what it was. He understood everything about success. Where the shot had to go, like how far the animal was going to run, what it looked like when you shot it, what it looked like when it was dead, how to eat it, how to cut it up. But he had never seen or been exposed to that same level of clarity when it came to wounding an animal, because he got all his gumption to go hunting off social media and some very famous individuals that were showing a lot of hunting there. So I don't know if that's indicative of a lot of new hunters, if they do or do not. But like you said, Yanni, on our platforms, I think we probably talk about it, at a good clip, and as much as it happens, we mention it. But I don't know, like, if you thought about this, Sam, do you feel like social media, particularly just because of the way it is, dead animals get more likes, so you see more dead animals, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, kind of within the social media influencer sphere, I think many people are loath to portray their own mistakes. We all try to give the best version of ourselves on social media. I mean, anytime I run into a friend from college or high school, they're like, "You hunt all the time. It's cool that you get to hunt for work." I'm like, I hunt on the weekends just like everybody else, or before or after work. I don't usually post a lot of selfies of me sitting here on my basement pounding on my computer. And I think that's even more true at the higher levels. People who have higher followerships, they don't want to. I think it's a natural thing to portray the best version of yourself, not the worst. But at the same time, we have one of the biggest platforms in the hunting world being on Netflix, and season 9 of Meat Eater dropped on Netflix like a few days before the situation that happened to me this year. I had just seen Steve's Colorado hunt where he wounded a bull elk with a muzzle loader. And he did not recover it. He did punch his tag or stopped hunting. I don't remember if he actually made that, that actual action of punching the tag. I don't remember, but he had to wrestle with that. And I think he did it very well, and talked about how, he could make some peace with it, knowing that there's no zero sum in the wild, that bull either survived, or if it died, it would feed, it might feed a black bear cub that might make the difference between that bear surviving and not making through its first winter. And I knew that for a fact, that 2 black bear cubs were going to be very well fed on that elk. And that wasn't exactly what I went out trying to do. I wasn't too worried about those cubs, and clearly that spot has a very healthy bear population. If I ran,
and those thousands of maggots too, right? You're not like trying to like feed the fly population and help them out, but like none of that stuff goes to waste, man. It all just goes right back into the earth.
And if this is a place where you frequent these mountains, like, you might get a chance to hunt that bear later on. I gave Giannis here the waypoint of that carcass so he could try to go hunt bears. Yanni, did you end up making it up there?
I never did, but I hunted not right to that carcass, but I certainly hunted the area just in general, like around it, like that, roughly that same ridge. and was, knowing that you had seen so many bears, I was always on the lookout.
Sure. And I probably would have gone. I mean, I killed a bear this spring, so I don't have a bear tag this fall. So, but if I had, I probably would have tried to arrow one of those bears.
Yeah.
When I was in there with the elk, or gone back with a rifle once I guess the bear season was open at that time. So yeah. I don't know. There's no complete loss if you look at it at an ecosystem level. And I mean, that may be just a platitude that helps us make ourselves feel better about it. But I think it's important for us to take a landscape level approach to what we do, because wildlife managers do, and that's how natural systems function.
It isn't it. Yeah, it isn't. It isn't right. It is a platitude at some level. But when you shoot an elk and you don't recover it and you shed some tears, like, I feel like you on an emotional level, you've done the work you need to do in terms of understanding the impact to you and the animal and everything. So I mean, there's that. Like, if you were to just say, that happens, and just keep on rolling, that probably isn't quite enough, depending on the scenario. But when you can first deal with the personal emotions, and then let that dissipate, and understand the ecosystem and how it functions above that, that's totally natural, I think.
Yeah.
But I would say that I said before we started recording that my dad told me not to talk about wounding animals early in my hunting life. I don't know that he ever told me that specifically. In fact, I can't remember him ever saying, "Hey, son, if you wound one, don't tell anybody." But I must have wounded, as a 12-year-old, I must have wounded at least two deer with a rifle before I killed my first one. And so we definitely went through that. But I'm glad, like, as the years have gone by, that this traditional idea that you don't really talk about as much has changed. So the fact that it's on Netflix, Stephen Ellis talking about it, is a big deal. To me personally, that we can do that, and it works for everybody, and it's not something that the quote unquote anti-hunters will attack us for as much anymore. I'm not afraid of that. That's for sure. So, Phil, you've been here the whole time. What do you think about this when you get on your first hunt, when you get out there, and you're faced with this, like, ultimate moment?
I don't know. I guess, I mean, so as you guys have been talking, I've been doing some hunter safety. I finished 1.5 units in the last hour.
Yes.
It's working.
We coerced him into it.
Coincidentally, the one I'm doing is on marksmanship right now. I mean, I don't know, man. I feel like it's just one of those things where it's just like, you do everything in your power to do everything correctly, but you guys have been talking about this. There's a million variables, but you have the power to shift things as much in your favor as possible and the animal's favor. I'm going to do my best, Ben.
Okay, I know you will, Phil. I know you will. I just wonder if this is not like the most happy-go-lucky way for you to experience this. Your excitement level. What's the number there so we can tell our friend Eric Hall?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, like, honestly, the more I work on the hunter safety course, my number goes up. I drifted away from it, but I'm coming back.
People are pissed at you, man.
Oh, trust me, I know.
Yanni has developed apathy for the situation, but people in my Instagram DMs are
Ben,
just like,
hunting's not for everybody.
It's true.
Giannis, I see what you're doing, and it's working.
I'm not trying to do anything, man. I'm being very just straightforward about the situation.
I sense your disappointment. I respond to you way more than Ben.
Yeah, every time Yanni's on and he says
now you're just stirring the pot, Phil. You're just stirring the pot.
Well, you never know. This may give us a chance to invite one of you listeners on a hunt with me and Phil on his first hunt, so you can give the play-by-play. Anyhow,
Ben, let me throw something out that I thought I'd bring up for this conversation that I always find kind of interesting when we start talking about ethics and then the decisions we make about how we kill animals and how clean we try to do them. I feel like that we never extend the same, level of care towards, how quickly and cleanly and all that we kill a small game animal or a bird as like that we do with a big game animal. I mean, all the servers are just held on this pedestal that it has to be, one bullet, dead as soon as possible, etc. Yet, like, when a flock of ducks fly by, like, I'm often like not shooting, and everybody else in the blind empties their gun, and sometimes 0 birds fall out of the sky, right? And so it's like, that is way like 2 totally different things, and it's completely acceptable to do that with ducks, or I don't know, maybe am I not? Do you guys think it's acceptable to have that happen?
acceptable.
Yanni, if you think if elk are 15%, as the state of Colorado says, I mean, ducks have to be approaching 50. And last weekend, I was with some friends in a duck camp. You guys know Hansi in production, and he had 2 new buddies. The duck hunting was terrible. I never even shot. I fired my gun once and missed, but the second day we were out there, we shot 4 ducks. Well, the group shot 4 ducks. I didn't shoot any of them, and we recovered 2 and lost 2. That they were winged and swam off and got in the wind. And I mean, Hansi almost flipped his canoe chasing after one, and it got into the reeds, and he never found it. And he exhibited an incredible dedication to trying to get that duck, like literally put himself in danger trying to do it. And that opened my eyes, because I've been duck hunting my entire life, and I've seen so many people just be, oh, well, that one got away. Hopefully, maybe it'll make it. Maybe it's coyote food. The coyote's got to eat too. And that's 50% wounding loss in that one duck shoot last weekend. And I've seen that my entire life, that ducks are difficult to recover, and hunters don't pay them that same respect as large animals. And I wonder if that's because we actually pay them less respect, or because it's a bigger payoff to find your elk, or I don't know. It's difficult to understand that.
With ducks, I mean, you see a lot of duck hunters they hold the duck up, right? Like a little, I think they look like they want to pet this duck when they kill it, and how beautiful ducks are. So I think there's like respect after the kill. I think one of the big parts here is that I always say that hunters love when the gloves come off. When feral hogs in Texas is that's a party for people, and the ethics kind of go out the door. But in this case, there isn't just one tag, and oftentimes you do not have to draw that tag unless we're talking about cranes or something like that, or swans when in the waterfowl world. So you feel like there's carte blanche, and if you don't get today's limit, you could get tomorrow's limit, and there's not such a on a personal level, a duck hunt can be 10 ducks or 3 ducks or whatever, depending on where you're at. And so I imagine people just take less umbrage of the seriousness of notching your tag or getting your limit when there's less to be worried about there. I don't know. But I do think that has a lot to do with it.
Interesting.
Yeah. I think you're probably right about that, Ben. It does vary by animal, but I think some of the overarching lessons remain. And I think one thing we need to point to is that death is rarely clean. We try to make it as much as we can, but even that perfect heart shot with an exit wound is going to be messy.
Yeah.
And lung shots aren't immediate death either.
Yeah, I mean, I think you should, and I've seen this as like a growing thing on social media. Like, I train so I want to be perfect. That's my goal, is to shoot an elk and have it, shoot a duck, shoot whatever. I train. But I'll tell you right now, and to be fully transparent, the times that I've failed in the woods have almost always gone back to my lack of preparation with the gear and my lack of practice with that same gear. And it doesn't mean just the bow or the rifle. It means everything, all of it. Whether it's not having your rangefinder attached to your bino harness so you can drop it when you need to draw, or a million different things that go that go into it. Me personally, I can just say that almost every time something has happened that I would say was poor on the animal's end, I could go back to my own preparation on many levels and fix something. So, I know you do too, Yanni. I know you do too, Sam, because you work with the Bridger Bowman and do a bunch of shoots in the summertime. We all love going to the Total Archery Challenge, and I've got a big elk in my backyard, and Yanni's got targets in his backyard. And so we definitely do that and take pride in that. And that's an important part of what you can control. So,
yeah, I think, to kind of close out this thought for me, I think over the years, I've certainly become a little sort of hardened to the emotions of the wounded thing. And maybe it's because, I just saw a lot of it, guiding, and you sort of just become it's just part of the deal. Right. And, but I think what makes me want to do good is not always necessarily so the animal dies quickly, but so that I don't have to go through those shitty emotions, and I have success because I liked the meat. I want to eat that meat, but that's why, I'm not trying to be a better hunter necessarily for the animal's sake. It's for selfish reasons, and that's because I want the success and what that equals, whether it's the meat or the picture on the Instagram, and not having to go blood trail and not having to think about it for 2 days on whether or not I got the animal. But that's what drives me, it's not because I'm oh, don't want the animal to suffer. The animal's going to suffer anyways, no matter how I kill it. You're taking its life.
Yep. I agree. I think if you peel all that back, man, we always talk about the game-like qualities of hunting here, and you want to win the game at some level. You want to have. I always the best feeling when I kill an animal is the feeling of accomplishment, and however that comes. I'd much rather have that feeling than the feeling Sam had or I've had in the past or whatever. So complicated, but I agree with you, Yanni. I think it would be false to say I all of a sudden start caring only about the animal when I'm about to kill it. That's just not true.
Yeah, and Yanni, I think something that really stood out to me there was that you feel a little hardened to it, and one thing I wanted to bring up is I have a really good buddy from college who's been trying to get into hunting the last couple of years, and he a couple of years ago when he was on his first deer hunt, and he had heard a story of a friend who had wounded a deer and hadn't recovered it, and he had called me and just wanted to know my perspective on that, and how could that happen? What a tragedy that somebody didn't recover the deer that they put an arrow through. And I told him that nobody wants that. It's sad, but it does happen, that it had happened to me, and that if he hunted long enough, it would happen to him. And so this year I partially felt like I jinxed him, because he drew his first elk tag this year, a spike elk in Nevada, and he shot a bull with his rifle and hit it kind of high and back, and didn't bleed much, and they looked hard and couldn't find it. And then later that week he shot one and killed it and put his tag on it. And he had called me, wanted to share in his excitement and everything, but then later in the conversation he told me that he'd lost one, and was very interested to know my take on that. And he knew I had killed a tag or killed an elk, but not recovered the meat, and still punched my tag. And he wanted to know if I felt like he did the wrong thing there, that he should have walked away without an elk and had punched his tag and called it quits. And I told him, man, this is your first big game animal. Your freezer has never seen wild game before. That tag is meant for you to take an elk home. And so it's a philosophical choice at that point that you're allowed to make. And I told him that I did not fault him for not punching his tag and taking one home. He's got
He's got 3 kids and a wife, and not like they want for anything, but they don't have wild game in their freezer. And he was so excited to feed them wild game for the first time. And I'm like, you absolutely should have kept hunting. I'm glad you did. I'm glad you brought an elk home for your family. It's a shame that happened. I can tell you feel badly about it. You're going to try not to ever let that happen again. But that tag is for you to remove an animal from the woods. And if you want to cut it up into tatters for your own personal, self-flagellation for a mistake, you're welcome to do that. But there's no one forcing you to. There's no legal mandate that you do that. So I told him I supported his decision to keep hunting. I'm glad that he gets to feed his children elk for the first time. But I told him that my freezer was still half full at that point in time, and that it didn't, change my ability to feed myself wild game throughout the winter to not recover an elk. And I went and killed a moose 3 weeks later. And now I have 0 freezer space and a couple deer that I want to still kill at this point. So it's always a little bit different calculus, but I think we need to remind people that, while it can be an ethical choice to punch a tag on an unrecovered animal, you don't necessarily have to. And, I think feeding yourself is the highest goal of hunting and should, is still a rational consideration in this discussion.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great place to end it. Thank you guys. I mean, I do, in terms of my concluder, as Steve would say, I just think that hopefully talking about this at length like this and hearing other stories and being able to relate to things, as Sam just said right there, just being able to have someone to relate to that you feel like you can say, like, this happened to you, this happened to me, what should I do? I think that's important for everybody that goes hunting. So we'll keep talking about it at a clip that's respectable, and when it happens, we'll address it, and you'll always hear about it from us.
Ben, let's have Eric Hall on and talk to him about it. I'd like to get his perspective. I'm not joking.
We will at some point. I probably could call him up right now. He'd jump right in. He's been sending me He's been sending me T-shirt ideas for the Eric Hall T-shirts. So
oh, nice.
He's into it. He's back on the THC. He left us for like a couple weeks, and I was wondering where he might have gone, but he's back with a vengeance.
Dude, don't let him go, man. Keep him in the live well.
We need him. We need to keep him in the live. All right, boys. We'll talk soon. I really appreciate it. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks, Ben.
That's it. That is all. Another episode in the books. Thank you to Giannis and Sam, as always, for diving into that. Be sure to go to our website and read our good friend Pat Durkin's article. Also, you can read Ryan Callahan's article from last year talking about his wounded elk from last season. So, and you can, as we said during the show there, you can watch on Netflix the Colorado muzzleloader hunt with Steve, where he wounds an elk. And so there's a lot of examples of that going on, but it's important to talk about, be open about it. Boy, if 2020 was anything for me, it was a hit to the ego, so I might as well just lay it all out there for you. There's no use in trying to hide it. And that's hunting all the way around. But Phil, we had a little gift come to the office the other day. I'm not in the office, so I didn't get mine, but you got something from a very special.
Yeah, I can only assume you have one too. But I go into the office a couple times a week to set up the soundboard for some recordings, and on my desk was a shirt. On the front, it says Phil the Engineer, THC Podcast, Bozeman, Montana. On the back, it says, "Hey, Ben, Phil, Eric Hall here." So I'm going to assume that was from our good friend Eric Hall.
Yes. Eric Hall, the leader of THC Nation, the czar, the beating heart of the land of THC. I don't know. Like,
I think I've received more gifts from Eric Hall than my own children in my lifetime.
Yeah, well, he loves you. He loves you dearly, and that's serious. Like a lot of podcasts, they'll come up with some I think relatively lame like ways to describe the people that listen. Like, don't a lot of famous people have like Taylor Swift, like Swifties? I don't.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Is that right?
Beliebers,
Justin
things
Bieber? Like
Bieber?
that. We don't have that. So maybe people can write into thc@themeateater.com. What should we call the listeners? I mean, Eric Hall is the leader, the grand poobah of the cult. Is it a THC cult? I mean, or if we created a cult?
I prefer not to attach that word to our listeners.
Probably a good idea. Well, write in at thc@themeateater.com. Thank you for the wonderful shirt. I can't wait to see Phil wearing it as a base layer when he kills his first deer. And he's going to take it off and pose for his first grip and grin with that shirt on, Eric Hall. So I think that's a pretty good idea, Phil. That was just off the cuff. But I think if you wear it underneath your first light, and whip it out for your first grip and grin that you'll post on your social media with like hashtag piles equals smiles or whatever.
Oh yeah, you know me. That'll 100% be my caption.
It'll probably be like, in your face, animal rights. Look at this. Yep. Something like that. All right. Well, it was a great episode today. Hopefully it was thoughtful, and hopefully we didn't annoy you with the shit stories. There's a moratorium. Don't send them in anymore. You're banned from the THC cult. You can't join the cult if you're going to send email in shit stories, okay? Just get it together. Say bye, Phil.
Goodbye.
Too long, 'cause I can't go a week without doing wrong. Oh, without doing wrong. Without doing wrong. Oh, without doing wrong. Drinking in heaven.
Hey everybody, listen up. I got mega huge news. Meat Eater Live is heading back out on the road. That's right. Join me and the crew. Clay Newcomb, Cal, Yanni, Spencer's going to be there. Phil the engineer's going to be there. Meat Eater Live headed back out. Now, when you get every ticket, okay? Every ticket you buy, you get a signed copy of our new Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook. This tour is celebrating the release of the book. Buy a ticket, get a signed copy, Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook, wild game recipes for the grill, smoker, camp stove, and campfire, which I'll point out is a $38 value. Here's where we're going to go. April 23rd, the Mesa Arts Center in Mesa, Arizona. April 24, the Balboa Theater in San Diego. April 25, the Grove in Anaheim, California. April 27, the Crest Theater in Sacramento. April 29, the Union in Salt Lake City. April 30, the Egyptian in Boise. May 1, the Wilma Theater in Missoula. May 2, the Bing Crosby Theater in Spokane, Washington. May 4, Revolution Hall in Portland, Oregon. And May 5, the last day of the tour, Pantages Theater in Tacoma, Washington. For tickets and more information, visit the events page at themeateater.com. Hope to see you at the show.